Hi, guys. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so pleased to be joined by Mary Catherine LaBossiere. I told her I would say it the French way because that's the only way I know how. She is a registered dietitian and the founder of Defy Nutrition, LLC. And I was really having a great time chatting with her in the green room because she's in Colorado. And so we were chatting about different places we like to visit. And we were also talking about why it's so important for us to have a little bit of repartee before we start on these things because, you have to develop that little rapport. And I have really enjoyed getting to know all the spouses that we've been interviewing because all the stories are so different. And so, Mary Catherine, welcome, first of all. But, I really enjoy your story because as we were sharing before, the opportunities are so different now because I think they're more entrepreneurial opportunities for military spouses. So I wonder if you could just take a few minutes before we get started with the questions to talk about your military spouse journey and how you were able to make a pivot from where you thought you were going to be to where you are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. When I go back and I think about my career, I am nowhere near where I thought I was going to be. And I think that's part of the beauty of being military spouse is you get all these opportunities to be flexible and bend in ways you never thought you would. But essentially I went from, high school into college. I got my degree in nutrition to become a dietitian. And then from there, I went on to get my master's in public health.
Wow.
And at that point, it's actually funny when I started my program to become a dietitian, one of our professors went around the room, kind of guessed what everyone would be working in. And the thing she pinned on me was research. And at the time I was like, me, research, like, no way. But don't you know, my first job was actually in research. So I worked in research for several years while I was getting my master's. And then my husband and I had been dating at that point and decided, to make his next PCS with him. So when we went to move, I actually had stayed back a bit looking for jobs and could not find any that were well paying and well meshed with the trajectory that I wanted out of my career.
Right.
And so I finally just made the jump and said, okay, I guess I'll move. I hope I can find something. And at that point, I had a couple offers, but they were honestly insulting. And I think that's something that sometimes can get away with as a military spouse because people know you're not going to be there forever. And so I decided at that point I was doing a consultant job. It was very part time. And so that's when I decided to start my business. There weren't any other private practice dietitians in the area. There was one other one, and she actually helped me start my business. So, talk about collaboration over competition. And that's where I started my business. Instead of just kind of being like, okay, well, I'm going to give up, I use that opportunity of there's no other dietitians here and I need a job that can move with me. That's when I decided to jumpstart or jump headfirst into entrepreneurship.
No, that's awesome. And then to clarify, when you say it was insulting, because we were talking about that earlier, and I don't want people to get the wrong impression, you were saying that it was going to require like an hour and a half commute to make less than what you can make locally doing just gig work or just
Yeah.
even no hourly work.
Yeah, so it was about an hour and a half commute to one of the jobs I had an offer for, and the pay, I mean, if you were, high enough up at McDonald's or Dunkin' Donuts, it was kind of equivalent to that. So it really, it didn't account for any of the experience or the degrees that I had. And then you had the long commute on top of that.
Yeah, no. And then you're also saying, as we were talking about challenges, about, a lot of us like to think, oh, we've come so far in terms of certification and licensing and reciprocity and all that other stuff. But you're saying that it's not the case for everybody.
Right. So I'm a registered dietitian, which is a protected credential. It's different than a nutritionist. So I do like to specify that part. But registered dietitians in most states also require licensure. And so, when you get your license, you apply and then you wait. So some states are a really quick turnaround. Other states, can take a while. So when we had moved to Tennessee, it took me over 3 months to get my license there. And even though you can fill out a form that it's reciprocity, that you already have your degree or your license in another state, it doesn't always make that process any easier. So they're working towards a licensure compact within our field, and hopefully that will be the case, soon. But being already a decade into your career, now it's just happening. We're definitely making those strides, but we do have some way to go with that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that because sometimes, something gets introduced and then we make great strides and everybody just puts it down as one and done. Like,
Right.
okay, we've made great inroads on this, so it's done, it's satisfactory, let's just move on. And you're saying not quite. Like, we
Yes,
still need to clarify
exactly.
more things. And I think that's a really great reminder because, everybody's always chasing the next bright, shiny thing.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's important to just remember to dot those I's and cross those T's and finish it through until everyone is, included in the.
Exactly, exactly.
I appreciate that. And so
Yeah.
one of the things about your highlights, and I hope everybody goes back and reads your highlight, but one of the things in your highlight that was really interesting to me was a notion about not scheduling around your service member spouse, right? The active
Mhm.
spouse. Can you speak a little bit more about that, what that means, how
Yeah.
you do it, and why it's worked for you?
Yeah. So when we first got married and I was brand new to the military life, I had a lot of family members who had served, but I never grew up in that environment. And so I was, the wait for him to come home for dinner. Don't make this plan because he should be home. And it honestly was quite lonely. And one of the pieces of advice I'd gotten from a more seasoned spouse was maintain your own schedule. If they're there, that's amazing. And if they're not, you still have your identity and the things that you want to do. And that was a game changer for me because I think a lot of us, there's a lot of times where we can have resentment towards the military and just like, want to blame everything on that. Um, and that's possible, right? But if we can approach it with a little bit more positivity or like control over the situation, I think that helps. And so, there's times when it might be, this is what we're having for dinner tonight. If you're not home by a certain time, I'm still going to eat. Of course, being a dietitian, right? Food is, is one of those things that's kind of at the forefront, but just understanding that, there's a lot about this military life that we can't control, especially the schedule, and being able to still do the things you want to do and you enjoy doing helps you be happy. So then you can be happy in that marriage as well.
No, I think that makes sense now that you've explained it because it's one of those we always talk about managing expectations through communications from both
Mhm.
sides. I think this is just another tool. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
it sounds like you're saying like, hey, just do what's good for you
Mhm.
and then plan as if they'll be there.
Yeah.
But if they have to work a late schedule or, they unexpected TDY, you still have plans.
Right.
And I think that it's smart because that also conveys into later after, the first retirement, because I find it's still the same way now where I have to make my own schedule. Um, because if I waited for him to be home to do stuff, I'd never do anything.
Exactly.
That makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. And just a little anecdote, when we were in the military and we were stationed in Germany, when my husband was in the military, we were stationed in Germany. I had met another spouse with kids my son's age, and we were planning to go see the castles in France because we're like, we'll just rent a car and we'll go do this. And we were planning to do it with our spouses. And then they both got not deployed, they went on a TDY.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh, it would have been fun. She's like, what do you mean it would have been fun? We're going. We're
Yeah.
still going. We're,
Yeah.
we already have the plans. We already have like the reservations. We're just going with two less people. And that was mind blowing to me. Like,
Yeah.
go to a whole other country without them. And she's like, absolutely, we will. And so I appreciate you saying that. I see that you would totally do that. You jump in the car.
I definitely would. And sometimes it can be hard because you feel bad. You're like, I'm doing these things, you're not. But also when they get to go on certain TDYs or deployments or whatever, they sometimes get really cool opportunities too. So
Yeah.
there's nothing to say we can't have them as well.
Oh, yeah. As they're sitting on a beach somewhere. Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
Right.
Not always,
Exactly.
sometimes. But just a little bit of a pivot. We have a lot of military spouses who are considering going back to school in hopes
Mhm.
of opening themselves up to more opportunities, which is what you did.
Yeah.
So, how do you think obtaining your doctorate is going to affect your career trajectory?
Yeah, so the doctor I chose, one, I always wanted a doctorate, for just being honest. I knew I wanted to get that. But the one I chose, I wanted to open more opportunities. So instead of getting just a doctorate in nutrition, which I feel can sometimes pigeonhole us in that career, I decided to get mine in health sciences, and it really combines my clinical expertise with more of like your administration business. And so for me, it's giving me that ability to go more into those leadership positions where I still have, again, that kind of clinical acumen, but also can work to move things forward and make progress in more of that leadership side of things. And it's not to say that you have to get a doctorate to get it, but the program I chose, I just think does a really good job at getting all the pieces you need to stand out when you're applying to those positions.
No, that's awesome. So it makes it sound like that involves a lot of self-awareness. Like
It
you need
does.
to know what you want to do. So that involves like planning, career planning. So
Mhm.
how else did you know what program you were going to choose? Are there like tests? Are there like surveys? Are there, counseling services available to help you decide that? Or did you just inherently know?
Yeah, so I think, there are a lot of services available. I would say that the shortcoming is that a lot of them are more targeted at your undergraduate degrees. I don't feel there's as many great resources when I was considering the doctorate route. But I leaned really heavily on mentorship. So I actually have a sticky note here from when I had my first conversation with one of my really good friends who's turned a mentor too. And when I first talked about getting a doctorate, she said, "How do you want to change the world and what's the best way to do it?"
Hmm.
And that sticky note has just like really driven me. And so I was looking at these different programs and just trying to figure out what I wanted to get out of it. And a lot of it, again, was that self awareness. Um, and I think too, I wanted a really flexible degree. So I wanted one that was virtual, which definitely narrows the opportunities a bit. But, when I was going through this process, it was what are my goals with this? What do I actually want to accomplish? What do I want to walk away with? What type of environment do I want to be in? Even though it's virtual, there is still a culture attached to any institution that you go to. And how is it going to connect me to that next step in my career?
No, that's awesome. And another question we get from a lot of people who are pursuing higher education is have you found there to be external funding sources to support PhD pursuits?
It depends. It depends on what you get your doctorate in, and the length of the program. There are a lot of times like TA positions, like teaching assistant positions that will give you either a discount or a stipend. I was really fortunate for my husband to give me his GI Bill. So that definitely factored into my decision. If you're not going to use that, if you're relying on your own funding or external, you definitely have to weigh a little bit more of what the ROI is going to be on that degree. But in general, I don't feel like there's that many options for external funding. And when they are, they're on the lower side compared when you think of the entire degree cost.
Right.
So I definitely looked for a long time. I had to swallow my pride to accept his offer to use that. I really did not want to, but ultimately we decided that was kind of the best decision for our family.
Yeah, it's a family decision. So I
Yeah.
appreciate your candor because a lot of people do wonder about that, because the cost is high and they want to make sure, it's
Yeah,
worth. But,
exactly.
I think along the same veins, with the benefit of hindsight, because you're 10 years into your career here,
Mhm.
what would you tell the you from 10 years ago within the framework of your career of where you are now and where you're going?
Yeah, so I definitely thought it was gonna be a straight line, right? Like I was a type A perfectionist, 5-year plan, 10-year plan, this is what I want. And then marry into the military, so to speak, and you really have to bend and be flexible. And so instead of thinking of it as it has to be a straight path, embracing those times that it is going to bend, it is going to curve, because through that, I've had the most amazing opportunities. I love what I do, and I never would have gotten to this point without embracing those unexpected pivots and changes in my career.
I love it. And you're saying what so many of the other spouses have said, which is you have to be open to opportunities and
Mhm.
recognize them as opportunities.
Yes, exactly. And the network that you get by being a military spouse, I mean, a lot of the contract opportunities I've gotten at this point are all through that network. And just building those relationships, I mean, that's a very underestimated part of anyone's career, I think, unless you're in business where networking is important. In clinical, you don't necessarily know that. And there's just so much beauty in that relationship building and embracing those opportunities.
No, I think you're absolutely right because I think some people think that networking is important in certain fields and not others. Because I
Mhm.
know that one miss, missed opportunity is people who are in the federal government. They're like, I want to break into the federal government. I don't know how to do it. And they're like, you have to network. Like people from the inside are saying, you have to network into federal positions just like anything else. Yes, apply, But it certainly helps if you know people at those agencies who can tell you, oh, this opening's coming up. You're gonna have a very short
Mhm.
window of opportunity. So make sure you look for it or whatever,
Yeah.
because you need that inside information. And just the opportunity to just sit and talk to somebody about, a 15-minute informational interview. What is it really like to work at this agency or whatever? So what is it really like to work as a nutritionist? What is it really like to work on the clinical side versus the research side? I 100% agree with you about the importance of networks and the importance of, just the mentoring that you spoke of earlier. Um,
Yeah. And with the informational interviews, I actually did a couple of those about my degree as well. So talking to people who are currently in the program or I just finished the program to figure out if that was going to be the right fit for what I wanted to accomplish. So that's another really great resource is just connecting with other people who have done it already.
yeah, because you can't be what you can't see, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna give you the opportunity to have the last word in terms of the career stuff and say, is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't, or is there anything that you're like, oh, I should have told people this?
Yeah, I think one thing is that we don't understand just how many resources are out there to be an entrepreneur, especially as a military spouse. And so I really embrace those. And again, it takes going out of your shell and being comfortable accessing those resources. And when I was a itty bitty new, military spouse, a lot of that was like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that. But honestly, there's just so many amazing organizations that help you identify what you want to do and how to get there. And so I really can't understate the value of connecting with the community and learning about all the programs that you can access.
No, I appreciate that because everybody is always looking at the gaps, and I like that you're emphasizing the opportunities. Like, they may not be perfect, but they exist, and
Yeah.
start there. And I think it's also great to remind I told you you were gonna have the last word, and I'm still talking. But I think it's also
Right.
great to remind people that it's not always, like, the military spouse organizations that help. There's also, like, state, federal level organizations like the SBA and SCORE. So look at all of them, right?
Yeah, and I mean, like a VBOC, like there's Veterans Business Outreach Center here in Colorado Springs, like that's an option. And a lot of times things say veteran, but they also allow you to access it as a military spouse. So that's another thing too, where, I think a lot of times if you're active duty, you kind of like shut your mind off to anything that has veteran attached to it.
Yeah.
But there's so many resources and, like you said, the SBA, SVDC, like there's amazing amount of things you can get without even having to pay for it, which is really helpful when you're first starting.
That's a great reminder, and I think I will let you have the last word on that, and thank you for joining us, and also thank you to our friends at USAA for making these conversations possible. I'm having the best time speaking to everyone and hearing about their journeys because everybody is doing amazing things, and the way you got there is different, right? Like, some people have had that straight line. Very few, but most
Yeah.
of them have done the zigzag, and so we can see ourselves in that, so I really appreciate it, and I hope you guys will be back next week. Thank you so much, Mary Catherine, for joining us this week, and you all have a great rest of your week. Bye.
Hi, thanks.